Yeah, beautiful rifle, huh? Hickok 45, bringing you a Winchester 1866 replica. One of the most gorgeous lever action rifles ever made, no doubt about it. One of the most gorgeous rifles ever made, I'd have to say. Beautiful, beautiful. That brass receiver. Most of you can identify it, right, by that brass. Let's take a couple shots with it and see if it will shoot. If I can see the sights. This is a replica made by Uberti, imported by Taylors and Company, and boy, do we appreciate it. I think I'm going to start with a 2-liter, like that orange one that got away the other day in a video. I guess we better put one in the chamber. Yeah, you're not going to get away today. Neither is he. How about a 12 ouncer? Nice. Oh. I think the sights are okay. I'm not sure. There we go. I throw it out to him. Wow, how much ammo do we have? Oh, a cowboy. How appropriate. Let's use the sights. Yeah, you still have to use the sights, even though it is a really shootable rifle. Yes, this is the 1866 Winchester reproduction, and it's a gorgeous firearm. This, among firearms enthusiasts, which are many of you out there, right? Or you wouldn't be watching this. This is considered one of the most attractive and desirable firearms, really, ever made. And partly because of when it was made, 1866. Yeah, that's why it's called the 1866, the Winchester 1866. Gorgeous gun. Now, this is a reproduction. You know, Uberti makes beautiful reproductions, and Taylors and Company brings them to us. And one of the advantages of having a reproduction in this particular model is that you can shoot it, because this was chambered in this little cartridge right here, the 44 Henry rimfire, and we went over that in an earlier video. That's an actual 44 Henry cartridge that I bought at a gun show, paid dearly for it, but I thought it'd be worth having, just in the interest of history. It is rimfire, and it's 44 caliber. That's what this was chambered in, the same round that the Henry rifle was chambered in. So, and all the way up through the production cycle of it, up into 1898, it was a 44 Henry rimfire. And again, where do you buy that today? You know, just not really available. So it's better to have one, if you want one to shoot, that you can fire, you know, in 44 special or 45 Colt, or something that maybe you hand load for, or that's available today, right? And whereas all other aspects of the firearm are pretty much authentic in terms of the way it's made. So I should probably be loading, but see that loading block? It's interesting. Elevator brings the rounds up, drops them in there. You don't really have a standard ejector. It just pops the empties out the top. It's a very interesting rifle design. Now, when I mention Henry, I'm gonna give you a little bit of history. I won't bore you with too many details. We want to get a Henry rifle here too at some point, and I'll give you some more of that boring history at that point. But whenever I say Henry rifle, I'm talking about the Henry that was patented in 1860, that was around and even used in the Civil War, especially by the North, in limited numbers. It was really the predecessor to this firearm. This is basically an improved Henry. And again, that was designed by Benjamin Tyler Henry, who worked in the same factory that Winchester owned, and Smith & Wesson were involved in, all this kind of back in the day. The modern company, Henry rifle, I'm not sure what they're called exactly, but they make really nice lever guns. They sell a lot of them, and they're an American company, and more power to them. And we've reviewed at least one of their rifles. They're great guns. So not talking disparagingly of them, but just remember, Henry, the real Henry, is a different proposition. Okay, goes back into history. So let me throw some more rounds in. This thing holds 14 rounds, I think, if I counted correctly. I think my 1873 just holds 13. Don't tell anybody. Oh my gosh. An assault rifle right here with a lever on it, right? But So, again, not to give you too much boring history, but you know, this is 1866. Most of you probably know the American Civil War ran from 1861 to 1865, and you know, most soldiers were carrying a single-shot musket, right? Rifled musket during that war, all right? But during that time period, we had all these other firearms innovations in progress, and the Levergun with a tubular magazine goes back some of the early designs. There were a guy named Walter Hunt and Lewis Jennings back in the late 1840s were working on something along this line, but it was very crude and very awkward and you know, just complicated, overly complicated. And Smith and Wesson, you've heard of those guys, I'll bet, Horace Smith and Daniel Wesson. They bought some of the patents, they acquired the rights to it, and they started a company called, I believe it was Volcanic Arms, or Repeating Arms Company, something like that, Volcanic. And they started making a pistol. It was mainly a pistol, and it was about this long. You may have seen one in a gun show, and it was, you know, about this long. It looks like you just cut this part off of this, or actually off of a Henry rifle, because you don't have the wood forearm. And it was like a short lever gun, kind of like a mare's leg in a way, except even shorter. And it was called the Volcanic. And the reason I have this mini ball out here is that it used a round like that. It used a hollowed out bullet, much smaller than that, I think 32 caliber or 25. And they had the powder just in the back, the base of that bullet. And that's how it had operated. That's what those early versions of the lever guns used from Hunt and Jennings. Well, Smith & Wesson acquired the patents to those designs, and Smith apparently was the real genius between those two, I guess. He developed a primer to include with it, so that was essentially the first cartridge. And then you may already know that Smith & Wesson, they developed the first cartridge, the 22 long rifle, in the mid-50s, 1850s, and then they applied some of that technology to their work on the lever guns, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's shoot this a little bit more. And again, 1866 was a very good year. Let's try something across the hill. Bring up around. I have a little trouble seeing the sight clearly. All right. If I can get one on the red plate, though, I'm in the ballpark. I love that sound. Try a pig. Nice, nice. Oh, sweet, sweet. Now we don't have a lot of power here. Well, I say that it's a 250 grain bullet, but still, well, it's not moving all that fast. Darndest thing, you got to hit them. Puts it down. If you can get the 250 grain bullet out there, it is moving on. Or I mean, it has a lot of weight behind it if it gets there. Let's try, let's see. Oh, I think there's some cinder blocks on top of that barrel. If I can, pieces, if I can get my sight. There we go. I can see my sight. Yeah. I need a red dot on this thing. What else need? Oh, I see some close-up targets here. And there's the pot. Nice. Click. Oh man, nothing like a lever gun. But as I was saying, and I was so rudely interrupted by this guy that wanted to shoot, the Volcanic Arms Company is where this is where a lot of the good stuff happened, okay? Again, don't want to give you too much history, put you to sleep, but the Volcanic Arms Company in the 1850s, great things happened. You got Horace Smith, Daniel Wesson there. You've got, I believe Henry was there, Benjamin Tyler Henry, that invented or improved and came up with the Henry rifle. And guess who was their major stockholder? The biggest stockholder in that company, Volcanic Arms. You guessed it, Oliver Winchester. So you got all those geniuses together in a way, and that's when good things started to happen. That's when Smith especially was working on the cartridge, this crazy hollowed out bullet that was called a rocket ball. he improved that. He figured out how to put a primer on there too, so at least it was all in one piece. And then he started experimenting with copper cases, came up with the 22 rimfire cartridge, which is what we still use today, right, if we can find them. And then they kept trying to improve that rifle, that volcanic. Actually, it was a pistol, I think they called it, the volcanic, and it was a strange looking bird with a lever, but again, it was kind of a cut-off rifle. And well, I think Smith left the company and a little bit earlier than Wesson did, and I believe Winchester kind of got more involved, and they kept trying to improve that, and Henry, especially Benjamin Tyler, got to working on it. I believe by that time the company became the New Haven Arms Company, and Winchester basically bought the other guys out, and they created a rifle that would actually work and use that cartridge technology that Smith had worked on in a bigger format than the 22. This one right here, you know, the 44 Henry rimfire. And so they came up, they had a pretty nice product there, the Henry rifle, no doubt about it. I think Henry actually sold or granted the rights to it to Oliver Winchester, New Haven Arms Company, and that's where the Henry came in. Now the reason I talk so much about that brings us up to the Henry rifle, you know, which started out as the Hunt, the Jennings, and the Volcanic and all that. But the Henry, once they got it to that point, Smith and Wesson were involved. You know, Winchester, mostly from a financial standpoint, I think, and then of course Benjamin Tyler Henry did a lot of the work. He did a lot of the work on that too, the further improvement of it. It is basically the same as this rifle. This rifle is basically a Henry rifle with some improvements. Okay, you got a forearm. If you've seen the Henry rifles, you don't have any wood on it, and the barrel and the magazine tube are all one piece. If you've ever seen one of those, and if you've ever shot black powder, which I'm not going to fire it in this, it's a borrowed gun. I never get it cleaned up. I have fired a lot of black powder in my 73, and you know, you've seen that, and we'll do that some more, but I probably won't do it in this gun, I guess. But it gets really hot. The barrel gets really hot, even with moderate loads. So I can appreciate what they went through during the Civil War, the people that had it, because you didn't have any buffer here, no wood. You couldn't. You had this this tab that you, with a spring that you had to kind of pull up here, I think, and then you flipped it over. I've never had a Henry. You flipped it over to load it. So you loaded a tubular magazine, kind of the way you do some of the 22s. You loaded it from up here, and then you flip that back over, and then let the spring fall down, or brought the spring back against it. And so the spring, as you fired, that tab moved on down the barrel, so it was kind of in the way, and even your hand, you had to work around it, see? So you couldn't have a forearm like this, because that was one of the improvements. And there's some others we'll point out here in a second, but I don't want to let the barrel get cold on me. Is this a beautiful gun or what? Oh, there's a pot that needs hit. Uh-oh, 12 ouncer, thought he got away. Think again, buddy, think again. There's one hiding. All right, I don't know if I could pick him off or not. Okay, what else needs to be shot over here? Oh, you know what we've not done? We've not gone gong hunting. Let's see if we can catch some of these big heavy slugs lumbering in through the gong. Nice. I love it. I'm gonna come up closer now on something. Oh, I was gonna rack off 5 or 6 really quickly, and we may demonstrate that. I've done that before with the lever guns. You know, you can really fire these things pretty quickly. This is sweet. Now, as far as anything else, now you got a Henry rifle basically improved. The action was improved a little bit. The big difference is, some of you already can figure that out, if you had to load the Henry up here and drop them down the tube, then you didn't have a loading gate, did you? So that was one of the improvements that was made by Winchester. Oliver Winchester changed the name of New Haven Arms there during that time period in 1866 to Winchester Repeating Arms Company. I think he moved them to Bridgeport around there, and it became Winchester Repeating Arms. And this was their first product that was called Winchester. This is the Winchester 1866, okay? But as you can tell from my ramblings, even the Henry and that firearm was, the same people basically, okay? But this was the first Winchester, one that was called the Winchester, from good old Oliver Winchester. And he had been a shirt maker of all things, and not necessarily a gun person, but the loading gate, big improvement. And you think about that, once you load the Henry and you shoot a few rounds, what are you going to do? How are you going to reload? You're fighting in the Civil War with one. You really need to empty it before you can, okay, take it apart or open it up and start putting rounds in it, right? But with this, it's like a shotgun or other rounds. You could fire 5 or 6, and you get a chance, you could top it off. You're behind a tree or whatever, you could always top it off. I just put 2 in really quickly. So that was a huge advantage. It allowed you to have a forearm and a separate tubular magazine, which would give you the opportunity to have different types of barrels. Some of the barrels were round, some are octagonal like this. And I think what else is different? Those are the biggest differences right there between the two. But the action, the toggle link action, is essentially the same as the Henry and the 1873. Not a lot of difference. The biggest difference, I think, between this gun and the 1873, which is a classic, is the brass frame. It has a steel frame, and the fact that it was chambered for the 4440. Center fire. Remember, we have a video on 1873. It was a very big year. Some really significant cartridges came about in 73. One being the 4440 center fire that the 1873 Winchester was chambered for. And so that was a big difference. But this thing was made all the way up into the 1890s, 1898. So, and chambered for this cartridge. So apparently during that time period, the rimfire 44 was still popular with a lot of people, and so was this rifle. So pretty interesting. I'd have been going for the center fire, I think, myself. All right, and the originals in this barrel length, at least, I think would hold 17 rounds. Can you imagine? What an assault rifle. Speaking of that, let's see if we can make it sing here a little bit. I've not shot this thing or tried to shoot it fast. I'll probably miss. Okay, let's get up here right and hit now. So they'll actually fired them all. I mean, you can crank them out with one of these things. I mean, the Levergun. Think about, now the reason I'm wearing this, I want to look like a cowboy at least a little bit, with the hat. And this is a percussion. Oh, piece of brass in there. This is an 1860 Army. And one reason I have that out, and the 1851 Navy Colt, this goes back to 66. You think about that. A lot of the Western guns we like, the Colt single actions, we're talking the 1870s. The 1873 rifle, which is so popular, the 1876, the 1886, kind of in the later period of the West, when the West was really wild, was before the 1870s, before the 1880s, certainly. And you go back into the 1860s, you're talking about, a lot of stuff going on. You got Civil War in the 1860s, the Indian Wars, the Native Americans, and all that stuff going on in the 60s. And in fact, a lot of the Native Americans carried the 1866 at the Little Bighorn. One reason Custer didn't fare so well, a lot of the Sioux had 1866 lever guns, and he didn't. They were carrying trapdoors for the most part, And I believe that's pretty much authenticated. Sitting Bull, Chief Sitting Bull, had an 1866. The word is he carried it on into Canada after the Battle of the Little Bighorn. So very, very popular rifle. And it goes back deeper into history of the Wild West. It really does, firing a rimfire, of course, but it, hey, think about how cool that was to have something that would hold 15, 16 rounds when most people are packing still a percussion pistol or a single shot rifle in 1866. Not everybody. You had the conversions of these pistols, and some of them of course used the same cartridge. You had some of the conversions were being made at that time and becoming popular, but a lot of people still carrying cap and ball, no doubt about it, and then single shot percussion rifles. So just keep that in mind. That is one of the interesting things I think about the 1866. It was kind of modern technology for the time, but yet pretty early on. And again, thanks to people like Horace Smith, Daniel Wesson, Benjamin Tyler Henry, Oliver Winchester. It's just interesting. We think of Smith & Wesson, we think of revolvers, right? Especially back in that time period. But they were basically a lot of the genius behind this thing. And of course they left the company to go on and focus on revolvers and making their little 22s and 32 rimfire revolvers and things. And I think they became pretty good at making revolvers, if I remember correctly. So they left their rifles to Winchester. But this is a beautiful gun. I really appreciate Taylor's and Company sending this as a T&E gun. Because I'm going to get it dirty, no doubt about it. I'll try to take good care of it, but it's going to get dirty. And just a beautiful gun. They're not cheap. They sell easily over $1,000. They're like $1,100, retail. So I especially appreciate being able to put one of these through the paces. We'll get a Henry in here and show you that. Now I'll give you a little more boring history on it. All right, one more load. What do we want to shoot? Got to shoot the cowboy, since he's a bad guy. Hey, there's a pot. Oh man. There's a 2-liter right here in my face. Gotta kill a couple more turkeys. There we go. Yeah, 3 with 1 round. That was my intent. Might as well finish him off, huh? Oh, sweet. Click. You eventually run out of ammo. This is one of the guns, this and the Henry, that became famous for saying that you load them on Sunday and they shoot all week, and I think that was actually the Henry. But again, this is the Henry. And historians and experts, unlike myself, will legitimately give this gun credit for being one of those guns that won the West. Almost every firearm you talk about, someone says, well, that's the gun that won the West, or it's a Peacemaker, or whatever the heck it is, or whenever it was made. But this goes back far enough into history that you could legitimately say it is one of the guns that won the West, whatever that means, right? But the 1866 Winchester, very interesting gun and a beautiful gun. And one thing I didn't tell you, this was referred to as the Yellowboy, which you probably already know that, the Yellowboy, and I believe that was dubbed by the Native Americans first. That's a general consensus that they call it the Yellowboy because of the yellowness, of the receiver. Pretty cool. Gorgeous gun. I mean, how can you hate this thing? Beautiful wood, steel, iron, and brass. Lots of it. I mean, this is about as good as it gets. I love it. Life is good.